Hello and welcome. This video will cover the torsion and circular sections experiment. In this experiment, we are going to test three different circular sections. One is a mild steel, then a brass tube. All of them have a rubber stopper at one end. You will need to do measurements before you start with this experiment. Vernier caliper is provided for you to measure the diameter, and measuring tape is required to mark the length, which is going to be the active length for the experiment. In this steel rod, I have marked it with white color so you can see. We are going to mark the first mark far from the rubber stopper as 1.5 centimeters, then another mark at 41.5 and 51.5, which will give you active length. If we consider this 1.5 is going to be held inside the chuck, we are going to have 40 centimeters and 50 centimeters for two trials on each of the rods provided. Then we are going to, before we fix the rod in, we need to adjust the angle, position angle in here to point at 0. The rod or the section is going to be fitted inside the chuck from this side, slowly till it reaches the other side. Remember always to have the rubber stopper from this side. This is important because the side of the bar is sharp, and this will avoid like hitting you or your colleagues by mistake. Then we are going to tie this chuck by hand first, making sure that the white mark in this case, or your mark at 1.5 centimeter is outside. Make sure it stays in the center, and you will need to adjust this as the chucks move to outside when you tighten it. When this is done, you will need to use the chuck key to tie this up. You don't need to over tie this, just a little bit. Then we are going to make sure these 4 thumb screws are loose, which will allow this side of the setup to move. We'll need to set it to 50 centimeters, which is basically the far mark at 51.5, which we marked earlier. We are going to tighten the chuck by hand, making sure the mark is exactly at the end. Again, that chucks move outside when you tighten it. We'll use the chuck key to make sure it's tight. No need to over tighten it. As this is done, we got a 50 centimeter of active length. You can use the measuring tape to confirm that. We are going to do 2 trials for 2 different lengths, 50 centimeters and 40 centimeters for each of the tubes. So you will need to fold 6 tables while you are on the lab. Now, as this is done, before we do any movement, we need to make sure the force reading in here reads 0. In order to zero that, we can use the note provided in here, which says set 0. We turn it slowly till we get 0 in the screen. As we get 0, still we'll need to make sure that the bar is actually under slight torsion, and we'll need to 0 again. In order to do that, we are going to turn this handle in here, which is basically applying torsion force by turning all this setup. Before that, we will need to tighten up all these thumb screws in here, which will make sure this is steady at this place and is not going to move forward and backwards again. Then we just move a little bit till we get some force indication in there. So we turn till we get some force, like 0.5 I'm getting in there. This should be a good start. Then we'll need to zero the angle using this. You can see now as we using this locking screw in here, we can move the pointer and set it to exactly 0. Similarly, we'll need to set the force again to 0. And this is going to be our starting point. All the tables you got in your sheet starts with the first row as 0 torque. Then your next step will be turning or applying torsion till you see the force is changing to 1 Newton. So you will need to turn slowly, give it a second or so to settle, then keep increasing till you reach to 1. Now I got 1 in this screen in there, and at this moment I will need to note down the angle. This will be the first step. We'll need to repeat this as steps of 1 Newton at the time up to 5 Newtons. So 1 is done. Next will be 2. We note down the angle, 3, 4, 5, and so on. We are going to repeat this for the 2 different sections we got, and we are going to try this again for a different length. Always, whenever you are done with one sample, you turn back to 0 force because before you disassemble the setup. So we get it to 0 force. Now we can open the chuck from that side and we can move the experiment setup to have active length of 40 centimeters. We have the mark in here for 40, which is basically 41.5 from the start point. As we reach that, we lock the thumb screws in here. And tighten the chuck. Then we repeat the same procedure. We apply a little bit of force, then we zero the angle, zero the force, and start on 1 Newton steps. So this is basically it. Measuring devices will be provided. The sheet is clear. You will need to fill 6 tables during this experiment unless you have been told something else. Thank you for watching.